Welcome to FireTech Talk. I'm Sean Kelly, and here today I'm with Charles Sanford, the Loss Prevention Control and Safety Director with Pye Barker Fire and Safety. Charles, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Certainly, Sean.
So moving on to our subject today, first question, how do safety regulations relate to the fire code?
Well, if you look at the history of fire code changes, they normally come about after major fires with property loss or fatalities. That's the history of fire code changes. NFPA, for example, has just celebrated, or they're celebrating now, 125 years in business. And while most of us think of the National Fire Protection Association as an American institution, their codes are actually recognized and adopted worldwide.
Okay, that's great. So after there's been a fire disaster, NFPA brings together professionals from across the spectrum to make sure that fire code is put into place to protect against those hazards that led to the loss of property and life.
Correct, and it's not a quick change at all. It takes a number of years. They go through code revisions. Some states are on a code revision cycle, or delayed cycle is what I could refer to it as. The NFPA codes, when they're first published, say for example a 2021 code, may not be adopted at the state level for 3 years, 6 years, or even 9 years. So the delayed cycle has a tremendous trickle-down effect, if you want to consider it that way, before it actually takes effect.
Okay. As a former Durham City firefighter, can you share us a little bit about how that experience impacted your role as an owner of a fire equipment distributor company?
Certainly. Firefighting is a very dangerous, but it's a rewarding career. And it made me realize how the effects of a fire or any kind of disaster could have on the families, the people that were directly affected as well as indirectly affected, businesses, the employees of that business, and overall business continuity. So I realized how FEDs could play a role in that. It also, fire department experience also gave me experience or the knowledge to perform fire extinguisher training classes by my company. So when I go into a fire extinguisher training class, and I've taught probably hundreds of them, I'm able to explain the different properties of smoke and fire, how the different extinguishers will suppress a fire. And I also talk about local or regional situations that have come up, such as natural gas leaks, gas explosions, the properties of natural gas versus propane.
Yeah, okay, I can definitely see how that would be an advantage, especially for engaging the end user with the equipment itself. I've heard that firefighters often use fire extinguishers for a quick knockdown before using the hose lines. Can you explain the concept of which extinguisher they would use and why that's their first choice?
Certainly. Typically, and it's generally used more on truck companies, it's a 2.5 gallon pressurized water can. And we lovingly refer to that as the water can. The person who is designated as the can man, or can person, that's their job. It's amazing how much fire you can control with 2.5 gallons of water. When water comes to a boiling point at 212 degrees, it will expand to steam at a rate of 1,700 to 1. Well, at 1,000 degrees, that ratio turns to 4,200 to 1. So steam can help put out a lot of fire.
Can you help me understand the importance of emergency lighting for when there's a power outage and why an annual test of 90 minutes is necessary? I think some people think, oh, you just press that button and if the light comes on, you know it's good. Can you explain a little bit of why that 90-minute test is necessary?
The 90-minute test is a full load battery test to make sure that that light fixture is going to illuminate for 90 minutes. Some power outages, it may not be an immediate need to leave. It may just be a simple power outage, but you want to make sure that the illumination is there for a longer period of time versus just for 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay, makes sense.
A quick test or just pressing the button to see if the light will come on is no indication of whether that light will function properly. So it may come on when you press the button and it may work fine, but when the power does drop out, that light may only work for 2, 3, 5 minutes, who knows? There simply is no replacement for the full 90-minute test.
Okay. So kind of switching subjects, we talked a little bit about knocking down the fire. Well, exiting a building is also safe. So can you explain why exit doors are designed to open outwards?
Certainly. We live in a reactive society. So as I mentioned earlier about fire code changes, exit doors opening outward became really a direct result of 3 major fires. One was the Iroquois Theater in Chicago. That was in 1903, I believe. There were 602 fatalities. Then 1911, I believe it was, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory in New York City. In that fire, there were 146 fatalities. Then in 1942, Coconut Grove Restaurant in Boston, there were 490 fatalities there. Since we're a North Carolina company, a couple that have happened in North Carolina, one was in 1989 at a chicken processing plant in Aberdeen, North Carolina, 25 fatalities. On a smaller scale, in 1996, University of North Carolina, at a fraternity house, there was a fire early one morning and there were 5 students killed. What makes that fire unique was that that was graduation weekend and Mother's Day weekend at the same time. And the fire chief in Chapel Hill fought to have the town adopt a code that required all campus housing to be sprinkled. So he made a vow to the parents that their child did not die in vain. He worked very hard on that.
Wow. So from what I understand, there's a fire in a building, people are rushing to leave, and after those fires it was determined if instead of that kind of stampede pushing against the door, if the door had released outward, that simple change would have limited drastically the number of fatalities.
Correct.
So that's why now it's been written into the standards and adopted by various states and local jurisdictions.
Correct, and that's in the building codes now. So take any room, and if you put 50 people or 5 people at the same door trying to push that door open when it opens inward and not outwards, that's what happened in the Iroquois, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, and Coconut Grove. So by the time firefighters were on scene and tried to make entry into the building or into the room where the fire was, I hate to say it, but all the bodies were stacked up at the door, so they could not make entry, and the people couldn't get out.
Okay, yeah, so it's a problem in both directions.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Charles, this has been a wonderful session. Thank you for sharing your time and your experience with us. We really appreciate it.
Well, certainly, glad to be here and glad to help.
Great. This has been FireTech Talk. Thank you everyone who's been watching. We hope you enjoyed it and found it educational and useful.